Hello, this is part 2 of my Rhythm of War reread and COSMERE deep dive, both part 2 vlog and part 2 of the actual book. Part 2 starts on page 297 of my copy and I'm currently on page 342. So I haven't read a huge amount of this section just yet, but even so, I still got quite a few tabs. So let's run through them. I don't want to kind of have too many tabs in each clip. So the main thing really for this part is that the epigraphs are letters or a letter from Sazed or Harmony to Hoyd or Wit about something that we don't yet know, but his correspondence with other shards, Sazed's correspondence I mean with other shards. And I can't actually remember where the letters go, so I can't remember what their overall significance is, but we'll get there. So a lot of the tabs are just tabbing those epigraphs, but there are a few other things in here that are worth mentioning. So one of them is just before Shallan goes to Shadesmar with Adolin, Mraize leaves her a head-shaped metal box that she can use to communicate with him with. And when she looks into Shadesmar, she can see that there's a light inside this box, but she can't access the box to find out what it is. And I think it's quite clear, and it becomes even more confirmed later on in the book, that that is a Sion, which is of course from Elantris, or the planet Sel. So we have an Elantris reference there. And then also just before they depart for Shadesmar, Adolin pays Kaladin a visit and gives him this metal disc. And this metal disc is something that Xyle gave him many years ago when he completed his training, and he said that it was money from where he's from. Now we know that Xyle is actually Vasha from Nalthis, Warbreaker, and so he has given Adolin, and Adolin has given Kaladin some money from Nalthis. So that's another reference there, and it's amusing because they think it's a really weird thing that they don't have gemstones, but of course it's a different planet. There is a further reference to connection, so I am increasingly sure that this connection thing is really important, and I've never picked up on it before. So I'll be really interested to see if when I next reread Stormlight, which I will do at least once before book 5 comes out, if not more times, I'll be interested to see where the connection comes up in the first 3 books as much, because I didn't notice it, but this time I'm definitely noticing it. And the most recent reference to connection that I have noticed is as they are preparing to go to Shadesmar, Adolin is thinking about one of the other Radiants that's going with him, who doesn't speak a lot of Alethi. It says, she didn't speak much Alethi, but most of the Spren were able to speak several human languages. He wasn't certain if it was an aspect of their nature or if they simply lived so long that they ended up picking up multiple languages. And that's clearly a connection thing, because one of the manifestations of connection, like with Dalinar, when he touches others he can speak their language. So, and again, Spren are splinters of honour, so yeah. And the Radiant that he was talking about, Adolin, was someone that gets referred to as the Stump, which is actually the orphanage master from Edge Dancer that Lift met. So that's another little interesting little tidbit. I think also that it's quite interesting that that same Radiance Spren is actually a Mist Spren. I don't know how relevant that actually is, but with the amount of Scadrial references that are happening in this book, I find it interesting that one of the pages from Shallan's sketch pad that we get is of a mist spren. It's probably nothing, but I can't help but tab it. And then also there's another reference to chickens. So this time it's a spren that looks like a bird in Shadesmar. It's probably not an aviar again, because as I mentioned before, or in vlog 1 I should say, Rosharans refer to any kind of bird that they're not familiar with as chickens, which I find quite funny. Okay, so this was another interesting one. We're back with Kaladin in the hospital, and we come across this sickness again, and that was mentioned earlier on in vlog number 1 back. And see, this is why I like all of these tabs, because I can easily find stuff now. It was in chapter 1 where Lurin mentioned that there was this strange sickness. So I'll read that bit again. He had heard rumours of something strange to the west, a new plague they were calling it, details were sparse. And then here, we're hearing about this same plague again. So he dealt with an unusual number of coughs. Apparently there was something moving through the tower, a sickness that left people with mucus in their lungs and an overall feeling of aches. He'd never encountered anything like it. His father had been tracking it though, and said that Carbranthian surgeons reported it wasn't deadly. A plague from the west that, when all was said and done, didn't live up to its reputation. The sickness barely attracted any plague spren, though there didn't seem to be many around the tower to attract, so that would be part of it. And the thing is, I know that Sanderson is known to have quite a repetitive writing style, but I feel like something like that is so minor that for it to be mentioned twice, there has to be some reason for it, and I can't remember it ever coming up again in this book. And the first time it came up, I marked it with green tab, because I was like, is this something to do with the Sheod and the Reod? Is it something to do with all of that, or is it just completely a Rosharan thing? I don't know, but the fact that it's come up twice, I feel like there's got to be something there. But I don't know if it gets dealt with again in this book. I don't remember it being dealt with. So maybe it's something to keep an eye out for in book 5. But the tabs are really stacking up now. It's only kind of nearly 9 o'clock where I am now, so I am hoping to read a good chunk more tonight. I might update you again tonight, depends on how late it gets, but I'm really enjoying this reread. I just posted the vlog for part 1, so hopefully you've watched that and you're enjoying it, and if you're here then hopefully that means you are enjoying it. So thank you for watching, and I'm going to carry on reading. So I've read about 150 pages since the last time I updated you. I'm now on page 479, so there's quite a lot for us to go through here, so bear with me in this clip. Firstly, I think I already mentioned that the epigraphs in this part are a letter from Sazed as Harmony to Hoyd or Wit. So I'm not going to read through them now. I'll just wait until I get to the end of the part, and then I'll just read you the whole letter. But clearly quite a lot of tabs are for the epigraphs because they're all Mistborn references, because they're all from Sazed. So we'll just skip past those for now and I'll come back to them later. There's a section here where again Shallan is looking through ELA's book, and it says another section of the book contained ELA's conjectures and information about the leader of the Ghostbloods, the mysterious Thydakar, who we now know to be Kelsier. That is kind of revealed later on in this book, I believe, so we will get there as well. And then also Shallan, basically when they're in one of the kind of Spren villages, towns, not quite a city, she's talking to one of the Spren and asking, oh no, this is when they're still on the barge, and she's talking to one of the other radiance sprens, and she says, "What happened to Bar Ado Mishram?" Shallan asked, eager. "What was she like? How did she connect to the singers, and how did trapping her cause them to become Parshmen?" Sorry, I had a little post-it over that last section. So connection, again, coming to the fore there. I'm increasingly convinced that connection is important, and I'm actually really looking forward to rereading the first 3 books to see if connection comes up. And then this next bit is the scene where Kaladin and Teft are trying to track down Norril, who is the uncle of a patient that came to see Kaladin in the medical centre, basically, and they find that these people with mental health conditions are being detained basically in dark rooms and in solitary confinement. And I just kind of observed that, you know, depriving individuals with depression or any other mental health concern, or anyone basically, of sunlight is not especially helpful. We all require vitamin D. It is the sunshine drug, as they say, and so that's not particularly helpful. But then this chapter is just so powerful in general, and particularly because it ends with Kaladin realising that he wants to spend his time trying to make changes to the way mental health is treated in Roshar. And I did this little... So yeah, I really like that chapter. From there, we're back with Shallan in Shadesmar. This section, this part of Rhythm of War, is quite heavily dominated by Shallan in Shadesmar, and Adolin as well. But I think that we basically leave them completely for the next 2 parts. We don't kind of come back to them until much later in the book, if I remember correctly. But anyway, so she's having a conversation with Patton, and Shallan says, "Yes, very brave. We humans are known to bite. Ha ha, yes, bite. And break your oaths and murder your spren. Ha ha." That's Patton. Shallan winced. True, those were the actions of other Radiants, not Radiants from her generation, at least none of the noble ones like Kaladin and Dalinar. So it's not like a cross-Cosmere observation there, but it's kind of Brandon Sanderson foreshadowing the fact that actually Shallan did murder her first spren. And I didn't see that coming in the book, but there you go, there's evidence of foreshadowing right there, which is something that Sanderson does just so well. I don't think there's quite as much in this particular part of the book as there was in part 1, but that kind of makes sense because this part is almost like the setup for everything that's about to go down in Urithiru, and we need to kind of have Shallan and Adolin settled for a while so that we can move away from them for Urithiru. Then again we're in Shadesmar with Shallan, and they're thinking about the fact that gemstones can't recharge with Stormlight in Shadesmar, and so Stormlight runs out and there's no way to replenish it unless you leave Shadesmar using one of the Oath Gates and then come back to it again. And so travelling across Shadesmar as Radiant is particularly difficult because you don't have access to enough Stormlight really. And there's this discussion about the fact that more perfect gems hold Stormlight for longer, so that's beneficial for Shadesmar, but not very many of those are in circulation. And there's also this paragraph which says Yasna had mentioned something else about these near flawless gemstones that troubled her. She found it odd that the gemstones in circulation as spheres were always so flawed that they lost light quickly. She said that they should vary and more perfect ones should be found on occasion, but that wasn't the case. So to me, that suggests that kind of the perfect or near perfect gemstones have all kind of been collected up probably by the Ghost Bloods, because they're trying to move investiture around the COSMERE via Shadesmar, and the only way for Stormlight to remain within a gemstone over a longer period of time sufficient to travel through Shadesmar would be in a perfect or near perfect gemstone, but I don't think that would work either, so it's interesting. Sorry, Haruki's crying to come in here, hang on. He didn't really want to come in, he just doesn't want to not be able to come in. But I've had to close the door because Leah's gone to bed. Then Shalani uses the box, the metal box that Maireys gave her, which clearly has a Sion inside, which we've already discussed. And then this is the bit where it's actually Adolin that is speaking to an Inkspren about the Deadeye that he's caring for, and Adolin discovers that this is a Deadeye who became a Deadeye recently, so once again foreshadowing there. Then we have another reference to the Sion, which is once again from the planet Cell. Of course, Shallan doesn't know what that is, but you know, we as readers of the COSMERE do know what it is. And then there's the section that's from Venli's perspective. So Venli and some of the Fused are travelling through the kind of caves and underground beneath Urithiru. They're travelling through there to get to Urithiru, and Venli is making various observations about the Fused and their different abilities. So we know that there are 9 different types of Fused with 9 different surges. So one of them she describes, it says, it wasn't quite like the Châtel-Eam, the flowing ones who could slide across any surface as if it were slick. So that's kind of like edge dancers, I thought. And then there's just an explanation here on the next page. They're talking about the fact that Venli and Raboniel are talking about the fact that Venli finds the Fused fascinating. And then Raboniel says 9 brands of Fused, 9 surges. You know the surges? The innate forces by which all life, all reality are connected, lowercase c. Gravitation, transportation, transformation, but I thought there were 10. That is human talk, Raboniel said to Derision. They claim a 10th of honour alone. Adhesion is not a true surge, but a lie that was presented to us as one. True surges are of both honour and cultivation. Cultivation for life, honour to make the surge into natural law. Things must fall to the ground, so they created surges to make it happen. And then they talk about the surges of the Fused that are currently with them, which is cohesion, the surge of axial connection, the surge that binds the smallest pieces of objects to one another, the surge that holds us together. The Macaeim can meld their essence into the essence of other things, intermingling their axes. All things are mostly emptiness, though we cannot see that it is so. A stone like a mind exists to be filled, but by thought and investiture. And then there's the adhesion, which they say is not a true surge, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure that adhesion is one of the surges that Kaladin has access to, and he's bonded to an honour spren, and Raboniel is saying that adhesion is a surge only of honour. So that kind of makes sense, but it is also interesting and probably relevant for some reason that I haven't managed to fathom yet. So again, any thoughts, let me know. There's a reference back to one of the interludes from The Way of Kings, I think, where Shallan says that's because it is. Spren notice when they're being watched. Recent scholarly reports indicate Spren will change based on direct individual perception. Like you can be in another room and think about the Spren and it will respond. So I'm pretty sure this was an interlude, as I say, from The Way of Kings, I'm pretty sure, where these 2 scholars one of them was experimenting with food and one of them was experimenting with Spren and trying to note down their movements. But when the movements were noted down, they froze, and when the person who was doing the experiment was no longer thinking about that, the spread started to move again. And that was the case whether they were in the room or in the next room, because they had their partner do the same thing but from the next room. So that's just an interesting little kind of reference back, and I feel like that's going to be relevant because I'm pretty sure there was a reference back to that particular interlude in Oathbringer as well. Might have been Words of Radiance. I have read these books 3 times, so don't be surprised when I'm remembering little details like this, but I just distinctly remember that particular scene because the first time I read it I was at the hospital waiting for an outpatient procedure, and so I just remember that scene, and so every time it's been referenced ever since I always recognise it, and it's definitely been referenced a couple of times, this being the most recent. So I just find that interesting that, you know, he's referencing back to something that was just a very, very short, seemingly unimportant interlude. So I'm really interested to see how all of the interludes are going to come together because clearly they're relevant for some reason. I think that that's it. Oh no. Oh yeah, we're talking more about Fused and the Mavset-eam, those ones of masks. The masked ones, illusionists, had the power to change how they appeared, so like light weaving there, and that's it, I think. Yeah, that's everything I've found so far for how far I've got. So I have not that much left in this particular part now. Yeah, about 77-ish pages until the end of part 2, and then I have the interlude, so I probably won't check in with you again until after I have finished those interludes, which run until 573, so basically about 100 pages until I check in with you again, which is roughly what I wanted to do. I actually read a bit more since my last check-in than I would ideally have liked to, but I'm gonna crack on, probably finish part 2 tonight and then read the interludes tomorrow, and I'll update you after I have done that. But thoroughly enjoying this reread. Have I said that enough times yet? I have now finished reading part 2 and the interludes, so I'm just going to go through the last set of observations before rounding out this vlog. And before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and read you the letter from Sazed Harmony to Hoid Wit. So it says, I'm reading it from the Coppermind rather than flipping through the chapter, it's just easier. And of course you can access it on the Coppermind as well. So, dear Wanderer, I did receive your latest communication. Please forgive formality on my part as we have not met in person. I feel new to this role despite my years of holding it. You will admit to my relative youth, I think. I have been fascinated to discover how much you've accomplished on Scadrial without me noticing your presence. How is it that you hide from shards so well? I have reached out to the others as you requested and have received a variety of responses. Much as you indicate, there is a division among the other shards I would not have anticipated. Endowment at least responded to my overtures, though I have not been able to locate Invention again following our initial contact. Whimsy was not terribly useful and Mercy worries me. I do think that Valor is reasonable and suggest you approach her again. It has been too long in her estimation since your last conversation. The deaths of both Devotion and Dominion trouble me greatly, as I had not realised this immense power we had was something that could be broken in such a way. On my world, the power always gathered and sought a new vessel. That said, the most worrying thing I've discovered in this was the wound upon the spiritual realm where ambition, mercy and odium clashed, and ambition was destroyed. The effects on the planet Threnody have been disturbing. Other shards I cannot identify and are hidden to me. I fear that their influence encroaches upon my world, yet I am locked into a strange inability because of the opposed powers I hold. I have begun searching for a pathway out of this conundrum by seeking the ideal person to act on my behalf, someone who embodies both preservation and ruin. A sword, you might say, who can both protect and kill. But this does not get to the core of your letter. I have encouraged those who would speak to me to heed your warnings, but all seem content to ignore Odium for the time being. In their opinion, he is no threat as long as he remains confined in the Rosharan system. I do not share their attitude. If you can, as you suppose, maintain Odium's prison for now, it would give us necessary time to plan. This is a threat beyond the capacity of one shard to face. Unfortunately, as proven by my own situation, the combination of shards is not always a path to greater power. We must assume that Odium has realised this and is seeking a singular, terrible goal, the destruction and somehow splintering or otherwise making impotent of all the shards other than him. To combine powers would change and distort who Odium is, so instead of absorbing others, he destroys them. Since we are all essentially infinite, he needs no more power. Destroying and splintering the other shards would leave Odium as the sole god, unchanged and uncorrupted by other influences. You say that the power itself must be treated as a separate in our minds from the vessel who controls it. I find this difficult to do on an intrinsic level, as although I am neither ruin nor preservation, they make up me. Regardless, I will try to do as you request. However, you seem more afraid of the vessel. I warn you that this is a flaw in your understanding. You have not felt what I have. You have not known what I have. You rejected that chance, and wisely, I think. However, though you think not as immortal, you are their kin. The power of Odium's shard is more dangerous than the mind behind it, particularly since any investiture seems to gain a will of its own when not controlled. My instincts say that the power of Odium is not being controlled well. The vessel will be adapted to the power's will, and after this long, if Odium is still seeking to destroy, then it is because of the power. Of course, I admit this is a small quibble, a difference of semantics more than anything. In truth, it would be a combination of a vessel's craftiness and the power's intent that we should fear most. Regardless, please make yourself known to me when you travel to my lands. It is distressing that you think you need to move in the shadows. And so I think a lot of interesting information there about the shards that exist. I think it's only one shard that we don't know the name of. Now we know the name of all of the others, and that's really interesting. And my battery is flashing at me, which is really helpful. And this concept that it's actually the power of Odium that's doing all of these things rather than Raise, is that the vessel's name? So that's really interesting. But other than the letters, there's still quite a lot in this part. Not as much as in part one, still, I don't think. And I find this part in general a little bit slower and probably my least favourite part of the whole book. I still enjoyed it. But I don't think that there's quite as much going on really in this part as in some of the others. And this battery is running out too. Looks like all of my batteries are running out, so that's just standard for me, isn't it? So when the sibling is whatever it is by Raboniel and Teft collapses, Kaladin feels a moment of disorientation, and it seems to me that he immediately thinks that this feeling of heaviness is his depression rather than the corruption of the sibling that's actually happened. And there's no real reason for him to think otherwise. There's no precedent for this situation, but I do think it's interesting that he immediately equates this different feeling with his depression being triggered. And it does make me wonder whether, you know, that plays into it. He's so used to dealing with this depression that clearly we are now in a completely different location, time, outfit. It's later the same day, but all of my batteries did run out, partly because of the hot weather, I think. But yeah, I couldn't finish my filming of this update earlier, so I'm back. It's now much later, it's still very hot, so I've got a fan on next to me, but we'll carry on. I think what I was talking about before was the fact that when Raboniel corrupts the sibling and changes the sibling's protection mechanism to affect radiance rather than the fused, Kaladin feels like it's his depression that's impacting him, because of course he has no reason to think that something's happened to the sibling. And it made me wonder, is he able to deal with that oppression more oppression of his powers, more because he's used to that feeling of oppression that you get when you're depressed, or because he is close to the fourth ideal, or is it maybe a little bit of both? So that was just a curious thing. Then he finds out that adhesion still works, which I thought was interesting because we established earlier that adhesion is only of honour. I don't really know what the relevance of that is, because we find out later in the interludes with Lift that she's not able to use, oh, the word is escaping me, but the one that lets her slip, but she can use regrowth, and I don't think regrowth is just of honour, so I don't know what's happening there. And yeah, none of the fabrials are working, span reeds aren't working, heating fabrials aren't working, no fabrials are working. So clearly there's either some impact on the spren or on the metals. I'm not really sure. I don't know. It's interesting though. I think we do find out a little bit later on, but I remember being really confused by all of the fabrial science that Navani was working on later on in the book, so hopefully I'll understand it a bit better this time. There's further confirmation that adhesion works for the Radiance, of course, is who I mean. If you're awake, that is, which Kaladin is, and again, partly because he's near to the fourth ideal, maybe the fact that he's used to that oppressive feeling as well, but I think Lift is like way past the fourth ideal at this point. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that we've got a word of Sanderson on that. In fact, let me check while I'm flipping through. Oh no, it doesn't say on the copper mind. And then once the occupation has happened and once Navani has surrendered, and basically what I'm trying to say is Kaladin is with Lirin, and Lirin just really pisses me off in this section. Like, he just makes me so mad. Like, look, I literally wrote this as I was reading it. He makes me so mad because he's like, you know, just let them come in and take your friend Teft and do who knows what to him. You know, just let them do it. And now you're just like an awful person for killing one of these Parshendi. But you know, this is war, and yeah, of course it's a bad thing to kill people, but Kaladin tried really hard not to, and Lirin just constantly makes Kaladin feel bad about every decision he ever makes, and it just pisses me off. So it's not really relevant, but it really annoys me. Oh, in the first, well, I suppose it's technically the sixth. Is it the sixth? Fourth interlude. There's Odium mentioning connection when talking about a connection between Kaladin and Moash. And then we're in Lift's perspective, and she just a passing comment, she says an old flute that Windle said looked strange. So that's, I think, clearly Wit or Hoid's flute that he gave to Kaladin in The Way of Kings, and that Kaladin left at Sadius's war camp when he moved over to Dalinar's war camp and it went missing. Clearly somehow Lift has got hold of that, so that's interesting and I feel like it's relevant. Wit said that it was really important for some reason and now it's back again, so I feel like it is going to be relevant for some reason. Also, I noticed that she's binding her chest, which I thought was interesting because she doesn't want to grow up obviously, but yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And then I finally got some purple post-its, so I was able to tab this chicken scene with a purple post-it. So there are actually two AVRs in this section. One of them is Mraize's AVR and the other is Gara's AVR, who I spoke about in part 1, who was a house steward in Gavilar and Navani's palace in the prologue. Prologue is the word I was looking for. And he's a furry chemist, which we've already established, and for some reason Mraize has killed him, and his metal mines, or whatever they are, Don't know if they're metal mines or if they're storing some other attribute, but his rings and his jewellery are gone, and we don't know whether, you know, he'd taken them off or maybe Mraize has stolen them. Don't know, don't really know why. I'm guessing that's going to come back up in book 5, but I don't think it comes back up in this book, at least I can't remember it doing so. And then I think that's it for this section, other than of course the fact that clearly Renarin remains important and mysterious. Somehow something is going on with his abilities which is hugely relevant, I think, because Odium can't see his future, which is interesting because I think that Renarin can also see the future. So I don't really know what's going on there. And again, I don't think we really find out in this book, other than just this idea that Renarin is important for some reason keeps being reinforced. So I'll wait until the end of the book to see if I have any predictions about any of that, but for now that is the end of part 2 and the second set of interludes. So I will see you in the next vlog for part 3 and the third set of interludes. I think part 3 is really, really good. We're about to have the scene where Kaladin is like creeping around with Teft on his shoulder and he's trying to avoid the, what's his name, the pursuer. So I'm really looking forward to that scene. I remember feeling really creeped out when I read it the first time, so I'm looking forward to reading it again. Don't forget to check out Ponderful books down in the description. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.